Ubisoft, once a titan in the gaming industry, now a clown. Getting dangerously close to becoming Blockbuster right before our little peepers here. It just keeps getting worse for them. Yesterday they announced they're shutting down XDefiant, which was their big game. Like, this is the game that for the last year they had been putting all of their elbow grease into. They were spitting in both of their hands, getting down and dirty, trying to push this game to everyone as much as possible. There was a lot of hype in the betas. People were saying, oh, this could actually be a competitor to Call of Duty. But unfortunately, when the game fully released, that hype was no longer there. People were about as excited for XDefiant as they are to learn that I'm 5'6". It's one of those things where it had a chance in the beginning, but because of not striking while the iron was hot, like, it had a period where Call of Duty wouldn't have been out for another, handful of months. XDefiant could have grabbed some market share, but they couldn't release in the right time period, in my opinion. And when it did fully release, it was too close to Call of Duty, so most people just decided, I'll just wait. And it didn't have enough unique elements to it to make it feel overly different from COD to a point where it could be better than it. So people dropped it pretty quick too. But I actually found it to be a really fun game, just didn't have staying power. And yesterday, Ubisoft said, we're not even going to give it a chance. We're not even going to let it try and evolve into something that can compete with COD. We're just going to throw our hands up, wave the white flag, and surrender. They released this message to the players. Thank you for your incredible dedication and support of XDefiant. Regret to inform you that we're initiating the sunset process starting today. That makes it sound like the ending to, Iron Giant or something. Like they're about to fly out into the sunset and, self-destruct. December 3rd, 2024. As a result, new download, player registrations, and purchases will no longer be available. Season 3 will still launch, so stay tuned for more updates to come. The servers will remain active and the game will be fully playable until June 3rd. There's a personal message from the executive producer as well, which I'll go over in a second. They then expressed that they will be giving full refunds for anyone who bought the Ultimate Founders Pack, as well as people who made VC and DLC purchases since November 3rd. At least there will be refunds given to players here. With Ubisoft on this title, I thought there was a pretty good chance that they'd just say, hey, tough luck, is what it is. Your fault. It shouldn't have spent money on it, I guess. I am kind of surprised, but pleasantly surprised that they are giving refunds. It's a free-to-play game that relies on microtransactions, and I don't know why companies like Ubisoft can't recognize that a lot of the time, the reason people don't want to spend money in games like this isn't even because they don't like the game or don't want to support it or something. It's because no one knows exactly how long it's going to be around for. So what's the point in forking over clams for some skins for a game that might not exist in 2 months? It's just a waste of money, and most people are just hesitant because this keeps happening. Games keep closing really quickly after launching, so no one really has a lot of trust that it's going to be around for a while, so why waste money on it, I don't know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're disappointed that the game's not getting more microtransactions, so it's not sustainable, but it's also not getting microtransactions and not sustainable because people think it might close in a couple of months, and now it is closing in a couple of months, confirming their fears. It's, you know what I'm saying? I think there's quite a few reasons why this game failed, and it's not because I think the game is bad. In fact, I actually do like the game, like I said. There were just some things that were suboptimal about it, like I mentioned, the release time period, as well as constantly postponing it from the beta, which had a lot of hype. There were some steps that ensured that it didn't stand that great of a chance of actually competing against COD. I went over some more of them on stream, so I'll play those clips real quick, and then I'll get into that personal message from the executive producer. Yeah, I did want to mention the Ubisoft stuff before starting. It just popped up for me and I was looking at it. So real quick, I'm sure a lot of you saw this. Ubisoft is already shutting down XDefiant. This thing barely had a longer lifespan than Concord. Man, the L's for Ubisoft just keep coming. That's not true. They had multiple betas. That's not the full release, brother. Well, I think one of the big reasons why this game ended up flopping, well, flopping's not even the right word, because during beta, people were super hyped for it, but they kept postponing the actual release, and by the time it actually released, it was already too close to Call of Duty that had a lot of positive hype, and that absolutely took wind out of its sails. I also think the biggest reason that it didn't survive very long is because they relegated to the sarcophagus of Uplay. Nobody wants to download Uplay for any reason. The only reason people even have Uplay is because they're forced to for Siege. If not for Siege, nobody would have this. And the only way to get XDefiant was through Uplay. So by not being on Steam and being like readily accessible on PC, I think that destroyed their chances. Skull and Bones is still up. It'll save this sinking ship. That's true. They still have their quadruple A Skull and Bones. Everyone loves Skull and Bones. But it's actually not just XDefiant that's getting the plug pulled on them. I read this as well. Well, man, it's not letting me open the whole tweet. But Ubisoft is closing a lot of their studios. They're cutting 277 positions through these closures. Ubisoft is getting godooshed in stock price, in everything, from all angles. Old Ubisoft was good. Old Ubisoft had bangers. New Ubisoft releases NFT games in 2024. It is such a shame, man. I did like XDefiant during beta, but once it came full release, I didn't touch it. There was other games that it was competing with, like it released in the middle of other games I was playing. Never went to it. Then I just played the new Call of Duty when it came. If Assassin's Creed Shadows fall, if Assassin's Creed Shadows doesn't go ballistic, I think Ubisoft gets purchased by a different entity. I think Tencent takes them. That's my little game theory. That is their last hope, and I don't have a lot of faith in Assassin's Creed Shadows because I think most people, like myself, are kind of fatigued with it. I'm always shooting spitballs at Ubisoft, and this one warrants a big loogie going through the pipes. It is brutal. Absolutely tragic. Well, not tragic. It's Ubisoft's own fault. It's not like the universe is working against them. Ubisoft themselves is working against their best interests. So they're shutting down Ubisoft San Francisco and Osaka. And then they're downsizing elsewhere, so it's around 277 people that are about to lose their jobs from it. What was the budget for XDefiant? I'm gonna speculate. I would guess between 50 and 100 million. Especially, that's not taking in marketing, but with especially like the amount of faith they had in this, I would think anything, it's 80 million. Like they put their nuts in it. They went really hard with trying to push XDefiant as the COD killer. Didn't quite pan out. The only thing that will ever kill COD is COD. Yeah, I think COD's at a point where people are so married to it, they're not just going to up and abandon it for something else, especially in an age where games are closing within a month or two of launch. Like, yes, XDefiant had betas. A lot of hype in the betas, but they kept pushing the actual release further and further down the road. When it finally comes out, people aren't playing it. There's not a lot of faith in Ubisoft, and they do end up closing doors pretty quickly. So it's hard for people to even buy into a franchise because you don't know how long it's going to be around for. Games last about as long as fucking mosquitoes now. So people don't like Ubisoft Connect because you need to be online. They have lots of microtransactions. Solution, I'm probably online anyways if I'm using PC to game, and I just simply don't buy the microtransactions. I don't get the overwhelming hate everyone has for it. Spoken like a man who's never opened Ubisoft or Uplay in your life. It's significantly more than that. That is single-handedly the worst launcher that has ever been constructed by human beings. The fact that it's even allowed to exist is an affront to God. That shit is turbo cheeks. Just do me a favor, to the guy that said that, download Rainbow Six Siege right now, make a Uplay account, and tell me how long it takes you to actually open that game. You have to open Uplay like 12 different times just to even see the menu. It's a joke. It's a fucking joke. In the more personal message, the executive producer goes over the journey as well as the goal to develop a new arcade shooter as well as shake up the genre by removing skill-based matchmaking, bringing back a more old-school arcade shooter experience, and also free-to-play. Now, real quick, I want to chime in there. I have been pretty outspoken that I'm not the biggest fan of skill-based matchmaking. A lot of people complain about it. There is a lot of whining when it comes to skill-based matchmaking. It's a very controversial, divisive debate. I believe that we had it figured out 20 years ago with Halo 2, where you can have a fully casual playlist with no skill-based matchmaking whatsoever, and then you can have your ranked playlist, which is all skill-based matchmaking. And I understand there's probably plenty of data that a lot of these soulless husks and suits at the top of the food chain at these game companies have looked at that says that if you have skill-based matchmaking, your super stinkers that can barely press 2 buttons at the same time are more likely to stick with your game because they'll be matched with people of equal ineptitude. So I understand that for player retention, I guess skill-based matchmaking is the gold standard, but truly I will never see the harm in just reverting back to caveman. Go back to Halo 2, where yes, in your casual game modes, you'll have some people that are teaming up with friends that are much worse than them, and they will wash the opponents. It happens. But it's a social game mode there. It has no meaning. It's not the fucking Esports World Championship. It's a casual game mode. I realize it might not be fun to be on the receiving end of that cheek clapping, but you go next. It happens. It's equally as not fun to go into a casual game mode and still have people sweating their ass off like they're playing ranked and trying out for fucking T1 or something. Like, it's still not great either, especially if you're playing with friends that are worse than you and you happen to bring in players that are much better than them. It's just a lot more fun when it's completely random. Just people that queue up for casual to just have a good time. And it's a problem that solves itself, by the way, because people will start to recognize that, oh, if I want to play against people of a similar skill level to me, if I want to play against people that are just as shitty as I am, instead of doing casual where I won't know, I'll go to ranked where I'm actually dog shit elo. So I'll play against people of dog shit elo. In Halo 2, if you wanted to make sure you played against people of the same caliber, you would go to ranked and you would play against level 3s and 4s. So that way you wouldn't have to worry about getting stomped by someone that was, fucking smurfing in casual. Like, that was the whole point of it. And I just really think that system, at least for my personal tastes, was optimal. So I did appreciate that XDefiant tried to do something different by not using skill-based matchmaking. It clearly wasn't enough to get people hooked on the product or anything, but I don't think the lack of skill-based matchmaking was the reason this game failed. The executive producer thanks the development team, saying how great of a job they did at building this game, and then talks about some of the achievements here. So, they broke the internal record for fastest game to surpass 5 million users, and in the end they had over 15 million players play the game. Those are big boy numbers. Those are some very impressive numbers for sure. It's just, unfortunately, it wasn't able to hold on to that many players, but even still, that's something to be extremely proud of. The message goes on just to thank the player base and thank all the developers and everyone that made the game possible. I want to mention something that I briefly touched on stream. I feel like we're in an era of comfort games where people have already made their bed and they're lying in it with the games that they know they like, and they're games they will always play. And usually people aren't going to play multiple games in this genre, like, full-time. I say full-time, but I mean, like, as their main game. So if you're someone that likes hero shooters, most people are choosing Overwatch. There's not really another game that's beating Overwatch for hero shooters. Even as many tomatoes as that game gets tossed, it's still the king when it comes to hero shooter popularity. And Marvel Rivals is about to drop. I liked the beta for Marvel Rivals, but I would be very surprised if it was somehow able to even take a portion of the Overwatch player base to it. I'd like to be proven wrong, but I truly just believe people choose these games in these genres, and they stick with that game, and they'll maybe tinker around, dip their toes into some of the other games that come out, like Sprout Up to try and compete with them, but never actually make a switch over to them. And another example is Call of Duty. How many times have we seen a Call of Duty killer pop up over the last decade? Too fucking many to count. And even a game like XDefiant, which did have huge player numbers, didn't have people stick with it because they'd rather just go back to their comfort game. Even though Call of Duty is getting a ton of shit, like a lot of people have been insulting the new Black Ops game, they still stick with it because it's their comfort game. That is their Call of Duty game, and they're not looking to find a replacement Call of Duty game, even though XDefiant was comparable. XDefiant I don't think was as fine-tuned as Call of Duty. Like, it's clearly hasn't been around as long as Call of Duty, so it doesn't have the formula down and the feels a little off. But overall, it had a lot of potential. It just never really had a chance to grow on it and evolve and reach that level because it wasn't sustainable, because it didn't have enough people playing it. And I do think a large portion of that can be attributed to Uplay itself. So congrats, Ubisoft, you put the clown nose on again. But overall, I really do think that if you're going to try and make a game to compete with a Call of Duty or an Overwatch, the odds are really stacked against you. Like, it's very, very, very slim chance of working out. Same with like live service games. Live service games are popping up and dying immediately all the time now because no one really wants a new live service game. If they want a live service game, they probably already found one like Destiny 2 or something. And even though Destiny 2 gets a lot of shit, most of the Destiny 2 player base isn't making the switch over to any other comparable live service game. I think people just would rather keep playing these games that they already are really familiar with and already sunk a lot of time or a lot of money into. And even though they'll try something like an XDefiant that's in the same genre, it's never going to be something they're going to make a switch over and spend a ton of money for. I have been saying for a while, I think it's much better, money is much better spent in the game industry developing lower budget titles that don't try and compete with something like a Call of Duty. Like, just do lower budget, unique titles. Single player games are fucking crushing it. Like, look at the indie space right now. Indie games are going ballistic because most of them are focused on delivering a unique experience, and the majority of them are single player experiences. Like, I just played Mouthwashing last night. Amazing game. That was a 2.5-hour game, and that was money well spent. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and stop ranting about it. Point is, big Ubisoft L again, per usual. The Ubisoft stock price, I don't know how much lower it can possibly go. Soon, Ubisoft stock price will be worth about as much as the wrappers to the Magic the Gathering cards I open. It's fucking brutal. And it's their fault, too. Anyway, that's about it. See ya.